Hello everyone, this is Dr. Deepthi Variku, Department of Physiotherapy, Dolphin PG Institute of Biomedical and Natural Sciences. Our today's topic is biomechanics of knee complex. The knee complex is composed of two distinct articulations located within a single joint capsule. These are the tibiofemoral joint and the patellofemoral joint. The tibiofemoral joint is the articulation between the distal femur and the proximal tibia. Today we will be discussing about the tibiofemoral joint. The tibiofemoral joint or knee joint is a double condyloid joint with 3 degrees of freedom of angulation motion. It has got two structures, proximal articulating structure and the distal articulating structure. The proximal articulating surface of the knee joint is composed of large medial and lateral condyles of the distal femur. Because of the obliquity of the shaft of the femur, the femoral condyles do not lie immediately below the femoral head but are slightly medial to it. The distal tibial condyles are two condyles, median and lateral tibial condyles. They are separated by a roughened area and two bony spines called the intercondylar tubercles. These tubercles become lodged in the intercondylar notch of the femur during the extension. The tibial plateaus are predominantly flat with a slight convexity at the anterior and posterior margins. Now let us see about the functions of the knee joint. The knee joint the functional shortening and lengthening of the extremity by flexion and extension is the major function. Then it supports body during dynamic and static activities. In closed kinematic chain exercises, it supports body weight in static erect posture as we stand. Dynamically moving and supporting body in a sitting or squatting activities or supporting and weight transferring activities during locomotion, they are all the functions of the tibiofemoral joint or the knee joint. Now let us see about the structures which are present around the knee joint. Before that, let us see tibiofemoral alignment and weight bearing forces. The femoral and tibial longitudinal axis from an angle medially at knee joint is of 185 to 190 degrees. If the angle increases 195 degrees, it is genu valgum, and if it decreases 180 degrees, we call it as genu varum, like you can see in this diagram. One more angle is the Q angle. It is the angle formed between a line connecting the ASIS to the midpoint of the patella and the extension of a line connecting the tibial tubercle and the midpoint of the patella. Normally it is 10 to 15 degrees. This angle is more seen in ladies as compared to men. If there is increase of this angle more than 20 degrees, it is an indicator of structural misalignment. So talking about the structures around the knee, we'll first discuss about the meniscus. Meniscus are the fibrocartilaginous C-shaped discs present between the femoral and the tibial condyles. The open anterior and posterior end of the meniscus are called the anterior and posterior horns, each of which is firmly attached to the tibia below. The medial meniscus has greater ligamentous and capsular restraints, limiting translations to a greater extent than a lateral meniscus. The functions of the meniscus is mainly to improve congruency of the joint, distribute weight-bearing forces equally, decrease friction between tibia and femur, and it acts as a basic shock absorber of the knee joint. When we talk about the meniscal nutrition and innervation, the location of the meniscal lesion and the age of the patient influences it most. The first year of the life contains blood vessels throughout the meniscal body, but the vascularity decreases with age. Once weight bearing is initiated, vascularity begins to diminish until only outer 25 to 33% is vascularized by capillaries from the joint capsule and the synovial membrane. After 50 years of age, only the periphery of the meniscal body is vascularized. Therefore, the peripheral portion obtains its nutrition through blood vessels, but the central portion must rely on diffusion of the synovial fluid. If we go for prolonged immobilization or non-weight bearing, the meniscal does not receive appropriate nutrition. So we get an avascular zones of the central portion of the meniscus, which reduces the capability of healing. In adults, only peripheral portion of the meniscus is vascularized, hence is capable of inflammation, repair and remodeling after injury or tear. Now, what are the compression forces which are occurring at knee? Normally, while walking 2.5 to 3 times the body weight, ascending stair 4 times. Now, meniscus triples the surface area by significantly reducing the pressure on the articulating cartilage. Lateral meniscectomy increases pressure at the knee by 230 degrees. That is how meniscus are important for our knee. Now, mechanism of meniscal injury include forceful rotation of the femoral condyle on partially flexed and weight-bearing knee. Medial meniscus is injured twice as much as lateral meniscus. Risk of meniscal injury increases with instability. The next structures which we'll be talking about are the joint capsule and the ligaments. First, the joint capsule that encloses the tibiofemoral and patellofemoral joint, which is large and lax. It is grossly composed of an exterior or superficial fibers and a thinner internal synovial membrane that is even more complex than the already complex fibrous portion. So we have the two layers, the fibrous layer and a synovial layer. The fibrous layer has again the three layers. Anteriorly, the extensor retinaculum, distal quadriceps muscle forms the facial layer, medial and lateral retinacula form the deep layer. Synovial layer is the internal surface of the capsule which is lined by the synovial membrane. The basic role is to secrete the synovial fluid, absorption of the fluid into joints which maintains the lubrication of the joint, nutrition to the avascular structures like we have already seen in previous slides, the menisci. Now let's talk about the collateral ligaments of the knee joint. The collateral ligaments of the knee joint are two, the medial collateral and the lateral collateral ligament. The medial collateral ligament can be divided into superficial portion and deep portion that are separated by bursa. The superficial portion of medial collateral ligament normally from the medial femoral condyle and travels distally to insert into the medial aspect of the proximal tibia, distal to the pes anserinus. The deep portion of the MCL is continuous with the joint capsule, originates from the medial femoral condyle and inserts onto the medial tibial plateau. The medial collateral ligament restrain excess abduction and lateral rotation stresses at knee. The knee joint is best able to resist a valgus stress at full extension because the MCL is taut in this position. As joint flexion is increased, the MCL becomes more lax and greater joint space opening is allowed. With the knee flexion, the MCL plays a more critical role in resisting valgus stress despite the permitting joint gapping. Now, the injury mainly of the MCL occurs when valgus stress is delivered over a planted foot. It is commonly seen in football players. MCL is rich in blood supply, hence the healing is very good. Next ligament is the lateral collateral ligament, which is an extracapsular ligament. It originates from the lateral femoral condyle and inserts into the fibular head. The LCL is primarily responsible for checking varus stresses and like MCL limits varus motion most successfully at full extension. Now we move on to the cruciate ligaments. We have the two major cruciate ligaments, the anterior cruciate and the posterior cruciate ligament. The anterior cruciate ligament may also be considered to consist of two separate bands that wrap around each other. Each of that band is brought to have a different role in controlling tibiofemoral motions. The anterior medial band and the posterior medial band are each named for their origins on the tibia. The major blood supply to ACL arises primarily from the middle genicular artery. So inferior attachment is to anterior tibial spine and it extends superior, posterior and attached to the posterior medial aspect of the lateral femoral condyle. The two bands, anterior medial band which is taut in flexion and posterior lateral band taut in extension. It primarily functions as restraint against anterior translation of the tibia on the femur. So major functions are same: anterior translation of tibia on femur, prevents hyperextension, secondary restraints against valgus and varus stresses. So what are the mechanism of injuries for ACL? Most common injury of any ligament of knee is ACL injury, mainly seen in football players, downhill skiing, baseball players, soccer players. The mechanism of injury is commonly in weight-bearing position, slight flexion and rotation in either directions, anterior translation forces on the proximal tibia, hyperextension injury, hyperflexion in bulky lower extremity muscles. Next ligament is our posterior cruciate ligament. The posterior cruciate ligament, which we can see attaches distally to the posterior tibial spine and travels superiorly and somewhat anteriorly to attach to the lateral aspect of the medial femoral condyle. Like the ACL, the PCL is intracapsular but extrasynovial. The PCL is a shorter and less oblique structure than the ACL. The PCL serves as the primary restraint to posterior displacement or posterior shear forces of the tibia beneath the femur. In the fully extended knee, the PCL will absorb 93% of the posterior direction load applied to the tibia. Now, what are the functions of PCL? It primarily restrains posterior translation, limits the anterior translation of femur over fixed tibia in rapid activities like descending, squatting, jumping, flexion, partial flexion of the knee. What are the mechanism of injury? So we have basically three major mechanisms. First is the pre-tibial trauma, that is the dashboard trauma. Second is the hyperflexion injury. It is mainly in thin individuals where the muscle bulk is less. Hyperextension injury, second ligament to injured after the ACL ligament has been injured. Now we will talk about the bursa. There are almost 14 bursas around the knee which reduce friction between the inter-tissue junctions during the movement. Activities that involve excess and repetitive force at the inner tissue junctions frequently leads to bursitis. At the knee, we see suprapatellar bursitis, prepatellar bursitis, also called as housemaid's knee, infrapatellar bursitis, also called as clergyman's knee. Here you can see the pictures of the bursitis. Now the plica. Formation of the knee joint synovial membrane occurs in early embryonic development. Initially, the synovial membrane may separate the medial and lateral articulating surfaces into separate joint cavities. By 12th week of gestation, the synovial septa and synovial septa are reabsorbed to some degree, which results in single joint cavity, but with retention of the posterior invagination of the synovium that forms some separation of the condyles. The failure of the synovial membrane to become fully reabsorbed results in persistent folds in specific regions of the membrane. These are called as plicae. Plicae may get inflamed or irritated, which is also called as plica syndrome. Now let us talk about the tibiofemoral motion. We will discuss it in two categories, osteokinematics and arthrokinematics. First, we will see about the osteokinematics of the tibiofemoral joint. Tibiofemoral joint has got three motions: flexion extension, medial lateral rotation and abduction adduction. So flexion extension is occurring in sagittal plane about a frontal axis. Normal range is 130 to 140 degrees, but there will be some restraints like knee flexion with hip extension goes to 120 degrees or less, like we see in prone or standing. It is due to passive insufficiency of rectus femoris. Knee flexion with hip flexion goes up to 160 degrees, like we see in squatting. This is due to synergistical action of both the muscles. Here you can see the movements. Now normal extension ranges from 5 to 10 degrees. Knee extension with hip flexion, like SLR, has some limitations due to passive insufficiency of hamstrings. Knee extension with hip extension, like we see in erect standing, occurs due to co-contraction of both the muscles. Here you can see knee extension with plantar flexion and knee flexion with ankle dorsiflexion. It also shows. Next is the axial rotation, which occurs in transverse plane about a vertical axis close to the medial intercondylar tubercles. The lateral rotation goes up to 0 to 40 degrees, medial rotation to 0 to 30 degrees. Now we will talk about the arthrokinematics of the joint. When we talk about the arthrokinematics, first movement we'll see is flexion and extension. The axis of tibiofemoral flexion and extension can be simplified as a horizontal line passing through the femoral condyles. The large articulating surface of the femur and the relatively small tibial condyle creates a potential problem as the femur begins to flex on the fixed tibia. If the femoral condyles were permitted to roll posteriorly on the tibial plateau, the femur would have run easily. For the femoral condyles to continue to roll as flexion increases without leaving the plateau, the femoral condyles must simultaneously glide anterior. Therefore, we see a rolling and anterior glide when the femur moves on a fixed tibia. Extension occurs initially as an anterior rolling of the femoral condyles on the tibial plateau, displacing the femoral condyles back to a neutral position on the tibial plateau. After the initial forward rolling, the femoral condyles glide posteriorly just enough to continue extension of the femur as an almost pure spin of the femoral condyles on the tibial plateau. Now, if we talk about the fixed femur, when the tibia is flexing on a fixed femur, the femur and tibia both rolls and glides posteriorly on the relatively fixed femoral condyles. Extension of the tibia on a fixed femoral incorporates an anterior roll and glide of the tibial plateau on the fixed femur. Here you can see motion of femoral condyle during flexion and extension. Now we also need to know that our ligaments, the cruciate ligaments, the menisci, they play a very important role. The arthrokinematics associated with tibiofemoral flexion and extension are somewhat dictated by the presence of the cruciate ligaments. If the cruciate ligaments are assumed to be rigid segments with a constant length, posterior rolling of the femur during the knee flexion would cause the rigid ACL to tighten. Continued rolling of the femur would result in taut ACL, simultaneously creating an anterior translation force on the femoral condyles. During the knee extension, the femoral condyles roll anteriorly on the tibial plateau until the rigid PCL checks further anterior progression of the femur, creating a posterior translation force on the femoral condyles. The meniscus also play a very important role. The wedge shape of the meniscus posterior forces the femoral condyle to roll uphill as the knee flexes. So we see both the meniscus and the ligaments play a very important role in the mechanism of the knee joint. Now we talk about the locking and unlocking of the knee. There is an obligatory lateral rotation of the tibia that accompanies the final stages of the knee extension that is not voluntary or produced by muscular forces. This coupled motion is referred to as automatic or terminal rotation. We have already noted that the medial articulating surface of the knee is longer. Consequently, the lateral articulating surface during the last 30 degrees of the knee extension, the shorter lateral tibial plateau pairs with femoral condyle completes its rolling and gliding motion before the longer medial articulating surfaces. As extension continues, the longer medial plateau continues to roll and glide anteriorly after the lateral side of the plateau has halted. This continued anterior motion of the medial tibial condyle results in lateral rotation of the tibia on the femur, with the motion most evident in the final 5 degrees of extension. Increasing tension in the knee joint ligaments as the knee approaches full extension may also contribute to obligatory rotation motion, bringing the knee joint into its closed pack or locked position. The tibial tubercles become locked in intercondylar notch. The menisci are tightly interposed between the tibial and femoral condyles, and the ligaments are taut. Consequently, the automatic rotation is also known as locking or screw home mechanism. The unlocking consequently is brought about by lateral rotation of the femur on the tibia before flexion can proceed. When we see in open chain, the locking, we see flexion to extension. There is lateral rotation of tibia. In unlocking, we see extension to flexion, that is medial rotation of the tibia. Now, let us discuss about the muscle functions around the knee joint. The knee flexors are semimembranosus, tendinosus, sartorius, gracilis, popliteus, biceps femoris, gastrocnemius, which are very important during walking and running. The knee extensors are mainly the quadriceps femoris, which is the prime mover of the knee extensor. Patella improves the movement arm of extensor force by increasing the distance of the quad tendon from the knee joint, as it acts as an anatomical pulley. The torque produced also plays a very important role in knee extension. Here you can see during non-weight bearing exercises, the quads muscle must generate more torque as the knee approaches full extension. Here in a weight bearing exercise, the quads must generate more torque as knee flexion increases to control the increasing moment arm of the superimposed body weight at the knee joint. So these are the muscles which are having action over the knee joint. Now let us see about the joint stabilizers. According to function classification system, we have static stabilizers and the dynamic stabilizers. Static stabilizers include joint capsule ligaments. Dynamic stabilizers include muscles and the aponeurosis. When we talk about the stabilization of the knee at AP, anterior posterior hyperextension stabilizers, we see there are anterior cruciate ligaments, iliotibial bands, ham, soleus, gluteus maximus, which limit anterior tibial translation. We have posterior cruciate ligaments, meniscofemoral ligaments, quadriceps, popliteal muscles, medial and lateral heads of gastrocnemius, which limit the posterior tibial translation. When we talk about valgus varus stress, the medial collateral, anterior cruciate, posterior oblique, sartorius, gracilis, semitendinosus, membranous, they limit valgus of the tibia. Lateral collateral, iliotibial, anterior posterior cruciate, biceps femoris, gastrocnemius, they limit varus of the tibia. When we talk about internal external rotation stabilizers, anterior posterior cruciate, meniscofemoral ligaments, biceps femoris, they limit medial rotation of the tibia. Posterior capsule, medial collateral ligaments, lateral collateral, popliteus, sartorius, gracilis, semitendinosus, semimembranosus, they limit the lateral rotation of the tibia. Thank you so much. Hope you got the concept of the biomechanics of tibiofemoral joint. In next lecture, we will be discussing about the patellofemoral joint. If there are any questions or queries, they are welcomed. Thank you so much.